Psalm chapter 9. Forgive, not as a practical rule, but as a promise of Jesus. The poor and the homeless won't always be forgotten and without hope. Psalm chapter 9:18. The symbol of Psalm chapter 9 is Muth Labben. This psalm must be tuned to the state of mind when a son has died. David's situation and state of mind are just as desperate and gloomy. Did David actually attach this symbol to the psalm? The David the first no would have attached the opposite symbol instead of this one. The content of the movie, Life is Beautiful, is dark, but the screen and rhythm are cheerful, making the movie even sadder. David would not have known about this. Anyway, the best place to see David's current situation and expectations is in verse 18. David is poor and has nowhere to turn. The CEV translation of the English Bible says this about the verse. The poor and the homeless won't always be forgotten and without hope. With one prayer, David expressed his situation and hopes. With this verse, David put handcuffs on God's wrist. He filled one wrist with the handcuffs of his desperate situation, and the other with the handcuffs of God's judgment and expectations. How would God unlock the handcuffs that David filled? David's knowledge of God's image enabled him to put handcuffs like this on God's wrist. David's faith is evaluated like Abraham's faith in Hebrews. Abraham believed that God would raise him and his son from the dead, even if he had to kill his legitimate son Isaac. Similarly, David was convinced that he was not a forgotten existence without hope in God. Rather than his strong faith, he believed that God he knew was someone who did not extinguish a smoldering wick. Like David, Jesus also put handcuffs on, but he put them on his wrist. If I read the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew and Luke, it is not ethical guidelines for me. But rather Jesus' self-declaration, the Sermon on the Mount, coming close. Jesus' words, be merciful, are not ethical practice regulations, but a firm promise that he will be merciful to me. The phrase, forgive, is not a moral principle or regulation, but a firm promise from Jesus that he will forgive. How did the image of God get imprinted on David's heart? Experiences of God were gently and repeatedly etched in David's heart. This could be called the company Emmanuel of God. Someone who has received love will live loving, and someone who has received forgiveness will live forgiving. God, like David, I desire to put handcuffs on your wrists. Today, speak to me your words of forgiveness, mercy, and salvation. Amen.